Hello. Hi. I find Magic the Gathering drama so fascinating. Why are we all mad at a small Magic the Gathering podcaster today? Okay, so there's a backstory to this one, so I'm going to start at the beginning, which I think this is the beginning. It's hard because I'm not an active member of the Magic community. Really, I'm just friends with lots of people are. So I see things when they break containment. When my friends start talking about things, I see them, and then I'm like, oh, whoa. And my friends aren't the most drama sensitive people, so often when my friends start talking about them, it's like, oh, something has really touched a nerve here. Anyway, a long time ago, November 2010, photographer Brandon Stanton started Humans of New York. And if you are older than like 15, probably, I feel like you have seen Humans of New York on social media and so on and so forth throughout your life. There's a book, there's a letter to Donald Trump, there's an interview with Barack Obama while he was president. The idea that Brandon Stanton had when he started Humans of New York was to take photos of people and ask them some questions about themselves and then post it online. And he did this in New York. And I guess that wasn't the initial idea, but then he started asking questions. All right, we're learning together. And this blew up. It became very, very, very popular. And then he started courting a little bit of controversy as well. He collected street portraits in Iran. He collected street portraits in Boston after the Boston Marathon bombing. So, we're talking about the European migrant crisis. So, there is. This is wild. This is wild. There's some guy who just decided to start taking photos of people in New York, and then he was like, I should ask them something about themselves as well. That would be interesting. And then 5 years later, he is raising money in Pakistan to help Pakistani brick workers who had become bonded laborers, which I'm going to guess is like a watered down version of indentured servitude, maybe. I don't know. Uh, this is just a wild, wild thing that happened in the world 2010 to 2015. Humans of New York, like, still a thing, 100%. But I feel like its ascension was around about that time of history. And um, someone thought to themselves, what about humans of magic? And so in 2015, 2016, sorry, Jarvis Yu is actually like a friend of mine for 20 years, was the first interviewee on a new podcast called Humans of Magic. Now, at this time in history, you could not make a podcast called Humans of Magic without drawing instant comparison to Humans of New York. Just like absolutely impossible. So we come into this podcast with an idea of what it is. The idea is that we're taking a look at the people who play Magic. We're going to learn a little bit more about them, and the like cultural understanding that you're promoting by creating this content is that you are like humans first. You want to focus on the issues that affect real people. You want to cast people in a like human light and say, hey, that's a human person. Human person, complex, like you and me. Maybe we connect. It's a project about empathy and connection and understanding others and stuff. It's a great project. That said, it wasn't the name that made it that, right? Um, if we look through what Humans of Magic is, where Humans of New York started as a project to take photographs of 10,000 people who lived in New York with little pins from whereabouts on the island they were from. Island? Look, whatever. New York's weird. I don't even, is that Manhattan or, I don't know. I can do like 3 days in New York and then my skin breaks out from all the, anyway. If you look at this podcast, there are like a variety of people who are just humans who play Magic, but also there are like huge names, like really big names. Paulo Vito Damadorosa, one of the like greatest Magic the Gathering players of all time. And not all of these names are like Jerry Thompson, famous for being like quite controversial in the world of Magic the Gathering, in my opinion. Like, will say the thing that other people won't say a lot of the time, and will speak out about how something is wrong with how Wizards is doing something, etc., etc., etc. A bunch of people who've competed on the Pro Tour. Martin Duzit talks about turning pro. Jarvis Yu comes back another couple of times. I think maybe Jarvis is just friends with the person who makes the podcast. I don't really know. Maybe I should ask him. I don't know. Look, if I'm going to make these videos, I'm not going to spend forever researching them. John Finkel, to me, one of the most famous Magic the Gathering players of all time. Mark Rosewater, that is the head designer for Magic the Gathering. So this is like really cool. Louis Scott Vargas and Marshall Sutcliffe, very famous Magic players. Gabriel Lassif, very famous Magic player. This is really cool. And then we have some content creators coming in. 2019, we got Deathsea and the Asian Avenger. Riley Knight, who's on the broadcast. Andrea Mengucci. I remember him winning some sort of tournament. Like, as somebody who hasn't ever followed the podcast, I already know who I think more than 75% of these people are from watching Magic. So this is not really a podcast about humans who play Magic. It is about the humans who have succeeded in the Magic community. This is like if Humans of New York was about the lives of the richest people in New York and spent no time whatsoever talking to all of the other people who lived in New York, which would kind of undercut the vibe of the podcast, right? And like, that's fine. Some of that is the realities of trying to make a podcast. It's still cool content. Like, it's cool to have all of these interviews with really cool Magic players. If you go and listen to a bunch of these interviews, like, I'm not going to be like super offended or anything. I'm not saying that this is terrible content by any sense of the imagination. I'm just saying, like, Humans of Magic is not quite Humans of New York. There are some significant differences here. And I wanted to point out, because I think it's kind of funny, that Magic players are historically open to a thing being called a different thing. And more and more and more in the Magic the Gathering community, Wizards is using as a marketing strategy, like, oh, you like Transformers? Look at this Magic card that is called the name of a Transformer, which is fascinating. And I guess people enjoy it, and that's sweet. But, like, a Magic card called the name of a Transformer is, to me, just a Magic card, and it's weird that it's being called the name of a Transformer. And there are salient differences between a Magic card printed for Magic the Gathering versus Optimus Prime, leader and hero of the Autobots in Transformers. When you borrow IP, which is what I'm going to call that, we are going to borrow the concept of Humans of New York to make something for Magic. We're going to borrow the concept of Transformers to make something for Magic. There's a lot of nuance in how that IP translates into the new context that it's put into, and whether there is synergy between the expectation of what that IP means and what it is being used for in its new context, or friction. with like what the IP should mean versus how it's being presented. Recently, Thunder Junction stirred up some controversy because Wizards made a Magic the Gathering set basically about the Wild West and did not really treat the idea that there were people who lived in the Wild West before Western settlers arrived very well. And yeah, to be honest, Wizards has an extensive history of taking things that are real for humans and putting them into a game that is played by humans, and not doing it very well. In particular, with representations of women, with sensitivities toward disadvantaged groups, with like cultural sensitivities. Wizards has generally, I think, paid a decent amount of attention to the fact that they are trying to do this, and probably has gotten better over time. I'd say almost certainly has gotten better over time. How could they not have? But they still misstep every now and then, putting IP from somewhere else into the game Magic the Gathering. It always kind of like, do you remember when the Barbie movie was coming out and there was a huge thing about how there was a map that was shown for like 1 second in the movie, and it arguably represented claims to the ocean between China and Taiwan in a way that favored Taiwan instead of China, and then there was actual internet ruckus about it. It's kind of like that. It like often feels weird to be a part of, because why does it even matter? It's a Magic the Gathering card. It isn't like a Native American elder. It's a representation of a Native American elder in this for-profit corporate card game in the year 2024. And while it does feel weird, it also feels important, because respecting the people who are in this world with us is important to me, and I think to a lot of other people. And to some people, like, saying that they are different from the other people who are in this world with us is important. There's a lot of shit going on there, isn't there? You could just make a game that didn't put Optimus Prime into it. Like presumably. Like all contact is political in nature in some way, but it's possible not to run headfirst into the fire as rapidly as Wizards sometimes does. I used Optimus Prime without any intention of saying that Optimus Prime was like the most politically charged thing they've done. It obviously isn't, but you can imagine how like a series about a Magic set about Ender's Game might run into some issues, etc., etc., etc. You just like don't necessarily have to take on the problems of Lord of the Rings, a fantasy novel written by a white man 70 years ago or whatever, in order to make your Magic the Gathering product. But somebody at Hasbro and or Wizards has looked at data and been like, no, we can like make Magic the Gathering product about Lord of the Rings, a fantasy series where like there is never an instance of two named female characters talking to each other or whatever. I don't know if that's true in the books. It's true in the movies. Unless you think Gimli might be a woman, or are okay with that mother whose village got burned to the ground being called Mother when she talks to her daughter. Anyway, I feel like I've gotten far flung already, but this is why magic drama is so cool to me. It's always like so vibrant and fascinating, because another thing that you get when you take the real world and you put it into a card game with like, for the most part, no stakes, although sometimes there are big tournaments and then they do have stakes, and that gets even more exciting. One thing that you get when you put the world into this card game is we now have this little toy box where we can look at the world and be like, we can prod it different ways and see what it does, and that's fascinating. That's really fascinating. So anyway, we borrowed the idea of Humans of New York and put it in Magic as a podcast largely about the people who are famous in Magic, not about normal people who play Magic. Now, okay. So far, not that much drama, but we have done a small oopsie. For sure, 100%. So this is an email. I don't want to like send people to yell at anyone. But I also don't want to strip away sourcing for a video like this to a point where people can't verify or read more if they're curious. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to um, put links that you can type out if you're really curious, but I assume that people who are just like momentarily mad are not going to bother typing out that many numbers in order to reach the place. So there's like a anyway, this is how I'm going to do it right now. There's like a frustration threshold where like, are you really so mad that you're going to type out 15 numbers to go to this hyperlink address? Probably not. But if you're later in time an internet historian who wants to see the source, you can, if you'll do the work. That's how I'm going to try to do it. Probably the hyperlink will break in like 3 months because it's Twitter, right? Anyway, there's a screenshot from a tweet from someone who reached out to Humans of Magic to suggest that they could come onto the podcast, who says, who received the email back. I'm currently receiving a number of requests from folks to be on Humans of Magic. I've decided to follow a sponsored podcast model when it comes to entertaining those requests. If you'd like to be on the podcast, I'm willing to have you on for a fee of $500 US. This fee would take into consideration my time in preparing, recording, editing, and releasing the podcast in video and audio form. In addition, I need to have a pre-recording call with you, about 15 to 20 minutes, to get a sense of your ability to talk on a podcast. I need to assess your public speaking skills to ensure that the podcast is listenable. You wouldn't pay the fee until after we've had the pre-recording call and I've decided that you're a good fit. I also require you to have a decent microphone. Audio quality is the most important aspect of the show. Generally speaking, as long as you have some microphone and not the one built into your computer/laptop, we should be alright. I hope you understand that I need to balance my time spent on the project. There are a ton of people in the Humans of Magic backlog, either in the midst of recording or on waitlist, and this is the most reasonable way I can address my priorities. I also leave it up to the guest whether they want to mention that it is a sponsored podcast or not. This is fascinating. Do you think the guy who runs Humans of New York sends emails to people like this? I don't. Anyway, I find this kind of fascinating, and there's there's an intense frictious juxtaposition between the thing Humans of Magic claims to be trying to do, which is like telling us about the people who play Magic, and the thing Humans of Magic is actually doing, which is like recording 1.5 to 2 hour long podcast episodes about the people who are most recognizable in the Magic community, where like these things don't actually achieve the same goal. And that's a criticism that I have that I'll give you for free. Um, I can say, like, as a creator, over the course of the last like 8 years of my life or whatever, I have never received an email like that a single time. I think anytime the idea of payment for being on a podcast has come up, it has been the idea of someone covering my expenses in order to do something for them. Like if I go record a thing in Canada over the weekend, which I do sometimes with a studio called Loading Ready Run, I've done that like 2 or 3 times, they might pay for my travel and hotel. And then sometimes there's like sponsored content where I am being paid to promote a product. We'll get into that later. But the idea that I would pay somebody else in order to make content for them like doesn't make any sense. It just like practically this doesn't. Humans of Magic should be a profitable enterprise. I think that's where the sentence ends. Like humans of magic should be making money off of my labor and the labor of the people working on humans of magic, and that's where humans of magic should get its money from. If I'm paying to record a podcast episode for them, like how do I make money? They have the rights to all of it. They get to run advertising on it, etc. Like this is not working for exposure. This is paying to work for exposure. This is like paying to work in an unpaid internship or something like that is like how silly this feels to me as a monetization strategy. Anyway, this is a misstep, but as far as I know, there's never actually been an episode recorded under this structure of Humans of Magic. So, small podcaster, maybe not a full-time content creator, doesn't realize that this isn't cool, thinks maybe they'll try it, finds out rapidly that it isn't a great idea, we move on. This is not like a go to jail, be excommunicated from the Catholic Church level offense. In my opinion, it's just kind of really awkward. I do want to talk like briefly about what better practice is, because I want to, I guess, make sure that you understand why this is bad practice, and also make sure that anyone watching this who is interested in content creation can learn what good practice is instead. So first off, talking about the bottom here, I also leave it up to the guest whether they want me to mention that it is a sponsored podcast or not. You have to. That isn't no. If you have a relationship with the content that you are, a relationship with the like product or people who you are making content about or for, you have to disclose that, even if it isn't financial. If my friends create a game and then I show it off on stream, I have to say that it's made by my friends. FTC guidelines say that we have to disclose when we have like entanglement with the content that we're making, which might change our opinions about it, basically. Summary of best practice here from Fourth Floor, who have the best write-up that I've seen. I've had to send stuff like this to people trying to sponsor my channel before, where I'm like, no, I actually do have to disclose that it's sponsored, and I am going to do it this way. So that's why I have this website on hand personally. But yeah, the thumbnail or video title includes hashtag ad. I think interchangeably use hashtag sponsored with hashtag ad. A description that visibly thanks the sponsor, a verbal declaration within the first 30 seconds of the video. Always start sponsored content with a verbal declaration. And then hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored in all social posts related to campaign and campaign content. Like if you don't do this, you can get fined. Like it's against the law. And the internet is lawless. There are so few things on the internet that are like clearly stated and actually enforced, and FTC guidelines is like one of those things. Like, no, this is actually real. You actually do have to disclose if you are having some sort of financial relationship with the people you're making content for here. There's also a flip side of it, because you can dwell on the legal arguments, and the legal arguments are often what I will send to someone who wants me to run sponsored content for them without disclosing that it's sponsored in FTC approved ways. But also there's just like, I want my viewers to trust me, right? So if I'm telling someone to buy a toaster and the entire time I'm being paid to do so and I don't even like toast, that is deceptive. I don't want to be deceptive to my viewers. If I explain my relationship ahead of time and make it clear throughout my promotion of toast that I'm being paid to make it, it's no longer deceptive. Better, right? I do think, though, that it still may be kind of a gross thing to do if you don't like toast. Like, it's weird for my viewers to watch my channel and see me promoting a game that I like clearly dislike for an hour. I try to avoid that happening, although sometimes I will see a game, think, oh yeah, it's probably pretty good, and then during the course of promoting it, I'll be like, oh geez, some of this stuff is weird. And that's kind of awkward. I don't know. Like, that runs into the laws of physics and time in terms of like how I can avoid it. It's pretty hard. I could have a test player, but it'd be weird. Anyway, if you explain the relationship, somebody's paying me to promote toast to you, and also I genuinely like toast. Like, I'm really excited today because promoting me to pay. Um, someone is promoting me. Someone is paying me to promote toast to you, and I love toast. I love bread, and you make it warm. This is great. I think that fresh bread, it could put the culinary industry out of business if people found out that they could eat it every day. I don't understand how people pay so much money for food when you can just get fresh bread and you can like make it yourself and it's so easy, and then you can toast it and it's even better and you can put some jam or honey on it. I have successfully sold myself on toast. I'm going to have some toast after this video. And if I explain that I'm being paid to promote toast to you, and then when I'm talking about toast, it's like pretty obvious to you. Oh, this person like actually likes toast, and and that's why they were like excited to promote this to me. And generally, like your viewers will be like, oh, that's really cool. That's cool that Steven's being paid to promote toast to us. That is the dream, basically, in financing content creation, is for you to get a sponsor that you actually genuinely like. Um, and it's kind of the dream of a sponsor as well. If somebody has an advertising budget, they really want to place that advertising somewhere where a bunch of viewers are going to see it and think, oh, the person promoting this to me actually like genuinely likes the product and is excited about it. So this is the dream of advertising. Advertising gets a bad rap sometimes, but it's because we do it absolutely fucking terribly. Like advertising is so constantly like a political ad on your chess video or something like that, and you're like, why am I being fed talking points from the far right now? I'm trying to enjoy chess. But if advertising is instead like you watch your chess video, there's no far right talking points, and instead someone's like, I just want to like give you a link to the chessboard that I use because I really like it. I find it high quality and love the pieces. And I've been playing with it for like 10 years. And the company who make it reached out to me and asked to like have me promote it to you a little bit. So here's a link to it. And if you want to buy it, 10% off with my code. Like that's a lot less jarring. That's kind of the ideal of advertising, me promoting something I like that I think will serve my audience well to an audience who it is going to serve well, and allowing the people who make it to get their product to people who want to buy it and will benefit from it. Isn't that lovely? Advertising is so fucked online that the idea that advertising can actually be like a nice synergistic relationship between three parties feels novel and lost. Anyway, some default monetization options that are not having people pay to be on your thing. Find a sponsor and promote their product on each of your episodes. Easy number one. Another number two that you might not think about as immediately, but is very common, make a Patreon or some other vehicle for viewers to give you money directly. That's another option. If you want to go for no advertising in your content, you probably need to make money somehow, and so it's going to probably have to come from viewers with direct donations. I have a question for you. We're sidetracking a long way away from the drama because we are just going to go from thing I find interesting to thing I find interesting, and that's why I find magic drama so interesting. There are always so many reasons to think about so many different things. Would you rather live in a world where content is paid for by the people consuming it, or the people who want to advertise things to the people consuming it? Interesting question. If you're sitting down to watch a show for an hour, do you want to live in a world where you paid $20 for a monthly subscription to a service that lets you see that show, and so you don't get advertised to while you watch the show? Or do you want to live in a world where you get to watch the show without any upfront payment, but during the show, things are advertised to you? Different people have different opinions on this, right? I personally find it somewhat preferable to have paid placements in my content rather than accepting or relying on money from viewers. I do accept money from viewers, and I am happy to. And if you all stopped paying me any money, I would like stop being able to live my life. So please continue like subscribing to things and supporting me and stuff. Yes, but also like a huge chunk of my income is from paid placements, to a point where I do not feel like I have to encourage or badger my viewers to give me money, or I'm going to struggle in life. Um, some people give me money. It is really helpful. But in general, a lot of my effort is spent toward finding good sponsors who I can put on the channel instead of finding ways to get my viewers to give me more money. That's where my energy is put in terms of monetizing my content. Um, uh, there are two nice things about this. One, we can sometimes land on that really synergistic relationship where I get paid to show you a game that you will really like, and that is lovely, and that is the dream that I dream for myself and for us. But also, if I push for my viewers to give me money, I regularly end up in really awkward financial relationships. In ways that you just never would with a business, because if you made public the thing the business was doing, they would go out of business. So, for example, when I was coming up in the streaming world, I had someone who was like pretty regularly giving me $1,000 a month, which was a big deal for me at that time in my life. And then they kept on DMing me sexual stuff and trying to talk with me while I was offline and shit. And that's weird. That is a weird situation for a human being to be put in. And a lot of the content creators who you see create content are in situations like that and having to navigate them in order to make rent because they are reliant on payment from viewers. And we live in a world where a lot of people will not pay for content they are consuming unless they have an ulterior motive, basically. There are many people who will, who are just like, I want to support the content creator I'm watching, so I'm going to pay some money to them, and that's awesome. But there's also like a loud minority, I guess. Like a lot of the people who are just like, oh, I'll just, pay some money to support the person I like. You don't really hear from them necessarily. Whereas people who are like donating $1,000 and saying, please send me feet pics, like they're loud, they're visible, they're intentionally loud and visible and requesting something because like that's what they're trying to do. And so this is not necessarily like a better option. Anyway, the entire reason for this diversion in the video was to kind of like talk about how we support content creators. I do want to say that there's no evidence that I have seen that Humans of Magic ever actually accepted money for anyone in order to make an episode about them. But like the request is still obviously shitty, and when you see somebody making a request like that, it does erode your trust in them. That was the other thing that I wanted to say. Humans of Magic, huh? Why are you interviewing all of these people who are just famous people in the Magic community? Can I just like, if we scroll up a little bit more, this is one that I found really fascinating. Euphro's in here. Kai Buddha is in here. There's one where we interview James himself. We've flipped the script and done an interview of ourselves, which is, okay. I make content about myself all the time, so I don't have a leg to stand on here. Oh no. I must have missed it. There's an interview with Alex Bertoncini, I think is his name, who's like one of the most famous cheaters in the history of Magic the Gathering. So like some of these people who are on this are, oh, there you go. Alex Bertoncini, interview with Magic's greatest cheater. This stuff. Welcome to today's episode of Humans of New York, where we will be talking to Donald Trump, the person from New York famous for breaking the most laws and causing the most harm to our community. I don't know, like whatever. It is content. It is undeniably content. Yeah. So there was a bigger oopsie now, which is why I'm making the video. These are the notes from the most recent interview that Humans of Magic did, which is titled "A Talk About Israel-Palestine." it's just, it's just, it's just Magic's drama just never. It just keeps like I don't understand how like it's just so dramatic. This is a Magic player, a medical doctor from Israel. He has played in 3 Magic Pro Tours and the Magic World Cup as a member of the Israeli team. Intro: how he got into Magic, Pro Tour Valencia and the Flood, World's Team Tournament, Israeli National Team, Med School, Legacy Format, COVID years, Pro Tour Philadelphia, challenges to being an Israeli Magic Pro, how family shaped his Magic career, why he chose Med School and changed careers. So far, this is like lovely, right? Like, this is just kind of. This is kind of like the vibe that I feel like Humans of Magic should have. Like, yeah, we're learning about someone and their life, and this is not a person I had heard of before. Like, this is one of the few instances where a person on the podcast is somebody I didn't already know a bunch of stuff about. So this is like, this actually does feel like someone who's lesser known in the Magic community, and we get to hear their story. So far, like, actually, like, quite a few thumbs up here, I would say. Prague, Amsterdam, and European transport. Present Israel situation, October 7th. Memories. Comes up at 4810. Touchy, but okay. I can see why we might want to touch on that for like 2 or 3 minutes. We're talking to an Israeli Magic player. I can see how that would be important, and then we can get back to like how Magic has built their life, right? Putting October 7th into perspective. I just want to say, I once read a 1,300-page book on the Middle East. And what that book taught me was that I was not qualified to make any statements about perspective in the Middle East. Um, and our 9-minute segment in a Magic the Gathering podcast is not going to. Israel's military retaliation. Okay, that's heavy. Western reactions now versus October 1st. Okay. American public sentiment toward Israel. Hamas is not a government. Be well informed, thoughtful, and supportive. Negotiation challenges. What needs to happen to achieve peace? Anti Zionism and anti Semitism. Palestine needs a state. Now, I haven't listened to this and never will. The thought of listening to it just like fills me actively with dread. It's not a thing that I'm going to do. I have gone out of my way over the course of my life to find like some sources of information about the world who I trust to speak accurately and fairly about complex issues, and they aren't a small podcaster about Magic the Gathering talking to someone I've never heard of about Israel-Palestine. So I just won't be listening to this, and you're unable to make me, and it just won't happen. Why is a small Magic the Gathering podcast tackling the nuances of Israel versus Palestine? I don't know. However, if I may put a positive spin on it, I think that one of the most charming and repeatedly drama-invoking, both at once, elements of the Magic the Gathering community is its resolute belief that it can work out the answers to complex problems from first principles. This is a belief that brings people to the game of Magic itself, where you are facing complex problems and you have a rule set which is vast but tractable. And within this game and rule set, which like seem big enough to you that they might be as complicated as the real world at sometimes, you have the power to work out solutions to problems. And a lot of people come to Magic and start working out the solutions to problems and doing it well, or even doing it better than other people. And mistakenly think that being good at playing Magic the Gathering means they are also better than other people, or maybe not better than other people, but like adept at working out problems in other places in the world. I mean, this is again a situation where I can look in the mirror a little bit, right? As a strategy gamer, I have decided to take it upon myself to speak about extremely complex issues about monetization of content and the entirety of the Magic community. So yeah, like, sure, I get it. I get it. I understand. Um, I will say that at this point in my life, I'm 37. Um, and I stopped thinking that it was easy to just randomly talk about shit I didn't know about when I was like 17 or something. Like, I remember I used to think, like, I'm really smart, I can work this out on my own, and then run headfirst into a political discourse or something like that. Um, but then I don't know, took some classes and read some books and was like, oh, a lot of this shit's like really complicated. Uh, and also, how I respond to it is different from how other people respond to it. So I can't make arguments from first principles which solve these things because my first principles are different from the first principles of other people. So there's still like a clash. The world becomes an exercise in empathy and learning about other people and trying to work out how we can all work together to arrive at a place of happiness together, um, despite seeing the same thing and having a different response. That's really hard. The world's really complex and does not have a simple solution. And yeah, but sometimes people in the the Gathering community decide that they should work out the solution or something. And so here we are. We get this stuff. Um, is an interviewer responsible for platforming the ideas of the people they interview? Um, this is like interesting to me because why we're talking about all of this is that the person who makes Humans of Magic has been uninvited from a big Magic event, basically, um, uh, after doing this interview. And then there's been like a little bit of a pile-on online. They said the hate mob won or something like that, and then the other people were like, uh, "You let a pro-Israel person walk all over you on your interview and did not challenge them in any way when they said a bunch of stuff that was frankly horrendous." Um, and yeah, I mean, I think the other people have a point. However, I think this is a really interesting question. So one of my all-time favorite journalists is Robert Fisk. This is one of the people who I trust to give me useful information about the world. I do not think he's perfect. I think sometimes he gets some stuff wrong. I also think that, like, as a human being, sometimes he gets stuff wrong. But, like, I wasn't expecting someone to be perfect. Nobody is perfect. If someone is presenting themselves to you as though they are perfect, they're just lying to you. That isn't true. Propaganda sounds perfect. Humans are not. So yeah, Robert Fisk interviewed Osama bin Laden 3 times, but despite not thinking he's perfect, I do not count platforming Osama bin Laden among his faults, which is interesting to me to compare to how I feel about a Magic the Gathering podcaster platforming someone who's pro-Zionism. And yeah, there's a lot of complexity there. Obviously, Israel and its objectives in the world are already heavily platformed here in the United States, in particular. Also, Humans of Magic seeks, at least by title, to platform underrepresented and normal voices in the Magic community, and that makes Israeli talking points feel out of place in such a context. I do think, like, in general, there is strange frictious juxtaposition between Humans of Magic as a choice of brand and what the podcast actually ends up being. So it's not hard to see why a lot of people might feel justified in being offended or mad. And that is my summary of Magic the Gathering drama that breached containment and got in my feed. I just find it fascinating. It's so interesting. All right, I'm signing off. Bye bye.